Budget Committee meeting of 6 o'clock Wednesday, May 25th, 2022. We're in room 207-209 at Town Hall. Mrs. Milton, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Slocum.
Here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Burraway.
Present.
Mr. Jakes.
Here.
Mr. Mylone.
Here.
Ms. Nichols. Here. Ms. Pavano. Here. Mr. Talbot.
Here.
Mr. Villabur.
Here.
With quorum present.
Please rise to the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I turn the meeting over to Ms. Bowery, we have item number 3 listed as the authorization to prepare bond language for the potential next generation schools project referendum. By way of understanding, before I ask Sylvia to enter the motion into consideration, is that we had to seek assurances from the state of Connecticut that the motion that's voted upon tonight does not start the compelling reason to not talk about this until the referendum time.
Yep.
So we did have that important meeting, and it settled in everyone's mind. Our town attorney was present. There was an attorney from the state of Connecticut, and everyone just agreed that everything was hunky-dory. But this sets in motion what will satisfy the requirements of the state. We're voting on this tonight because the minutes of this meeting, not only does this have to be affirmed, but the minutes of this meeting have to be certified, including the town clerk's signature. There's a lot of things that go into that prepared packet, and this gives us ample time to make sure that gets done. I think the goal date, Jeff, is June 10th.
June 30th
Is the final
filing
day.
date, but we're shooting for the 15th
Right.
roughly
Right.
to have the
And-
documents right.
And we should meet all of that. Now, the other thing that's not included tonight, because it doesn't need to be, it doesn't start a quiet period, but that would be the discussion about setting out to populate a building committee. That will be introduced for consideration at our June, is that the 14th meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll be the process for advertising and then interviewing, okay? And then I expect, could take some time. We don't know for sure, but just so you know, that's wasn't an oversight here. It's just, we're gonna give it the time that it can take. Okay, with that, Ms. Nichols?
Thank you. That was a good succinct discussion. So I'm happy to present this resolution. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 052522-1. Be it resolved that the Cheshire Town Council hereby authorizes Sean M. Kimball, Town Manager, and James J. Jascott, Town Finance Director, to prepare bond language for the next generation school modernization project referendum not to exceed $166,600,000. The referendum must be scheduled and the results must be reported to the Office of School Construction Grants and Review prior to November 15, 2022.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. Any discussion? Okay.
I just have one question, and it's just recollection. The number that we're setting here for the amount, could you remind me where we got that number? I know we went through it a bunch of times, but I don't have it in my head right now. And I just want-
That's perfect. Just a quick summary, that of course is the total.
Yes,
So that includes, it doesn't include or mention the state funding sources. But that is based on the 50%, the final analysis of the cost based on an 8% escalator for the next 3 years in
Okay.
assessing the costs.
okay,
So that's more or less a pretty strong estimate. They feel comfortable, that is Collier's, feels comfortable, that's a pretty safe number.
so that includes our estimate, contingency, and an escalator, and that's how we got to that.
Correct, and
Okay.
there's 3 years of 8% escalation
Right.
there.
And an inflation factor for the higher cost of materials.
Right.
now.
Right, So,
All of which is gonna be less by then, so it's.
well, it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the impact is now.
Yeah.
With the November referendum.
I understand.
But nonetheless,
I just wanna remember where I know we've gone through it
Yeah.
before, but I couldn't recall. I
No,
apologize if I.
very fair question.
Fair.
Very fair question. And basically, that 166,600 is the number that's all the backbones to the education request tonight, basically, in their budget.
And it does not include the state reimbursement.
It does.
That comes out of that.
In the referendums, as we always
In the-
do,
in
we
the
cite
text.
sources of funding,
Mhm.
so that the voter knows that this is the expected contribution from other sources like the state in this particular case. So is that fair enough?
I'm-
Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor? Let the record show, the motion carries unanimously, and we are
Big
all
sigh.
present. Yes, that's great. Very good. Okay, with that, Mr. Bowery, I'm gonna let you take this on and turn it over to whoever you chose.
All right, thank you. Well, it's good that we had some time in between operating budget and capital budget. Just a reminder, the operating budget is quite a few fewer items, so we will do this in a little bit of a quicker format, but that doesn't mean we won't be thorough. Doesn't mean that we should not ask questions as we move along. Tonight's devoted strictly to education, and then next Wednesday will be the other town departments. I'm hoping, and I don't know whether we're going to get out an email to everybody. I haven't looked at my email in the last little while, asking if the 6th or the 7th of June for the following week was available. I know the 8th on was not for somebody that week, and the following week we have our regular council meeting. But the hope is that we'll have a third meeting to follow up on questions we have from this week and next week, and then also to talk about where are we on this and try to get some kind of a summary together with the expectation that we can adopt within June before everybody starts breaking away for vacations. So that's where we're going. Now, we will not be able to vote on the referendum questions, the bonding of those items until August. There's very specific language when that has to be adopted. But that doesn't mean we can't adopt a 5-year plan in all due course in June. So that's where we are. This is the largest capital budget ever presented. It has the largest
Should be proud of
project
yourself.
by far. has the largest by far project ever in the history of the town. But we have the biggest concern we've ever had right now, I think, in terms of scope, in terms of size of the problem. The students are coming. They are coming, and they are here. 125 more than was at the first of the year, I believe you said. So that's quite a bit, and they are coming. So with that, Sean, do you have some overview comments you want to make, or you save that for your departments
Yeah, I
next
think
week?
I'll present those if that's okay in the interest of time.
Sure,
On Wednesday.
absolutely.
I think tonight
We'll devote. Okay, very good. So Superintendent Solon and COO Massiana, did I have the title right?
Yeah.
Okay, right-hand person, however you want to say it. If you two want to come up and be part of this, please, just sit in with us or something.
I'll let Vin,
But come and sit
Vin's carrying the water. I can
Or sit,
here.
okay, please. We want to,
Right there.
yeah, we don't want you sitting off the back.
I appreciate it.
That's why we're in this room and not upstairs.
Send some of these around.
I do have some handouts, including the presentation. And I'll give you the presentation as long as you promise not to look ahead. All attention on the.
Are there two things or one door?
That's all covered, one and two,
Oh,
guys.
there's one at the top. one at the
There's
bottom.
a roof replacement schedule and a copy of the presentation. And I'll try and make
I got the
this,
same thing.
this
Yeah,
portion
I think the
brief.
Oh, I
this
get
is
it.
coming around this way.
Yeah,
Okay.
So then on the last page here,
He's already looked ahead.
Thanks, Jen.
yeah, no problem.
And since it's a school presentation, I brought show and tell tonight.
Nice, nice.
okay, so these are what's left, and
Okay.
I don't think we all got those.
So roof
Nope, I
schedule.
didn't get a,
Yeah, Sean's got the
I
rest of
didn't
the
get, I didn't get a roof
They're coming
replacement.
behind you.
So that'll go home to.
Yep.
Right. Now, I would remind us all, year one is what we're actually adopting and spending when we do. Years 2 through 5 are placeholders. So let's talk about them if we have questions, but let's not get too hung up on years 2 through 5.
So what I did is I put together some PowerPoint slides. Those of you that have been on the council for a number of years, you're familiar with some of the slides that you'll see here. They've been updated. And I know Mr. Malone is our newest council member, so he may not have heard some of this, so I think it'll be helpful. Because what's important is to put a little perspective around our capital budget and how it ties to our maintenance budget on the operating budget side. So this first couple of slides came out of the presentation that was made to the Board of Ed during the operating budget, at which time we also presented our capital budget. So these are our buildings. And I know that everybody's familiar that our oldest building is Humiston, and Highland, our newest building, is now at 51 years. And so our average building age is 71 and a quarter years. Our buildings are not just schools. You know, you're aware that our buildings get a lot of after-hour usage, and so some of the wear and tear on the buildings does come because of the outside usage. And this is just to give a little perspective of how many after-school events that we had at each building. Now, this was before the pandemic. You know that during the pandemic, we did shut down building use, but it is back open. But that's just to give you a sense that we have thousands of building uses after hours by all different users, some school, but a lot outside, including the YMCA and Park and Rec is a large user of our building. And so, if we do get approval on the next generation phase 1 plan, it does start to move our average building age down. And obviously, we do hope that that passes.
Near teenagers.
And if you throw out Humiston, it's even
Well,
better.
Yeah, you're right.
And there's-
It's throwing off the curve right there.
Yes, exactly.
So I just wanted to put that in there to put a little bit of perspective around the fact that we, do have this plan that we're looking at. And when we built our capital budget, we actually took that into account by, removing, any requests for the buildings that are coming offline, which would be Chapman, right? During, with the plan, Chapman would come offline, the old Norton would come offline, and the Darcy building would come offline. So now we're in operating budget, not capital budget yet, right? So our operating budget for maintenance and operations that was requested, and the council has approved the budget. The Board of Ed has reduced it, although the Board of Ed didn't reduce any of the operating budget that was requested. So that is the operating budget for next year for maintenance and operations. That $4 million represents about 5% of the total Board of Ed budget. What I really want to focus on here is, even though it's a $4 million maintenance and operation budget, 33% of that is for building maintenance and repairs. The rest of it, 37% is utilities and heating. Another 19% is the cleaning services that we have nightly and during breaks, and then maintenance, supply, and equipment maintenance and repair. So when you look at what we spend on our buildings, kind of on a day-to-day basis from our operating budget to take care of any maintenance or repair issues, it's about 1.3 million. So it is a relatively, small piece of the total maintenance and operating budget. But that does go towards, keeping our buildings in good repair. The infrastructure is aging. Everybody knows that. In addition to our core buildings, we do have portable classrooms, which are now permanent at Highland and at Norton. So those are part of the fleet of buildings that we have to maintain. We have the maintenance garage. The bus depot, the depot was replaced about 3 years ago under our new contract with DATCO, and DATCO paid for it. But we do pay the overhead expenses related to that. And in total, interior square footage of all our buildings currently is about 760,000 square feet. The important thing that I wanted to get to relates to aged infrastructure, and this is where I have some show and tell. So can anybody figure out what that is? Pipe. Okay, it's a pipe. It is the pipe that burst at Darcy just last week. The interesting thing about that pipe is that it happened during a non-cold spell, right? And so we know Darcy's about 75 years old. So that's the section of pipe. It was in in an inside wall, and if you looked at that wall and saw this nice PVC sticking out, you wouldn't know that age of the pipe that was behind the wall. You know, and so that's just the section of pipe was, I believe, this one. Fortunately, the pipe burst at a time when we did have staff in the building, so the amount of damage was limited to 2 classrooms. We were able to get a restoration company in right away. I mean, the total cost, you know, of repair, including the restoration, is somewhere around $10,000 in total, so it's not too bad. But the point is that, you know, the issue that we have with our building, this is the section, this is that section of pipe. I'll pass it around, and I have disposable wipes if you're afraid to touch it. This is
As long as it's shiny by the time it gets to me.
And Rich Clavette is our
Seems so much
facility.
smaller than it does on the shows
I
on
know,
the
I
picture.
know. This is another section of pipe. This is section 2. This one came from the high school. It was a return nipple from a steam trap in the utility tunnels, which everybody is familiar with. So just over the years, this particular section of the nipple just rotted away, steam escaped. So that one was 60 years old. Now this thing, I had to get an explanation of what it was. So it's part of, now, and this hole was drilled so that it could be drained before. So the failure point was here. Unfortunately, this was about a 22-year-old piece of pipe that was in the last Cheshire High School edition that we did. You know, so the complication that we have as our building's age is not so much what we see. Like roofs, we know. We could get a condition, we can assess it. It's the infrastructure behind the walls, whether plumbing, electrical, or HVAC. Those are the items that, as buildings, you know, get to 50 and then 75 years, that we're going to be struggling with. Okay, so that ends the show and tell portion.
So you passed the pipe.
Yeah.
So it's not like brass and copper?
This one is brass.
Right.
Yeah, this was a brass, you know, pipe. Now this is water supply. It was, you know, for the toilet system, by the way. This particular pipe. Yeah, this is black pipe, and well, that's a piece of copper, but apparently that fitting was the copper section meant some other type of pipe, so you know it's not unusual for a failure to occur at the joint, but it's only 22 years old. Only 22 years old.
Yep.
Okay. So if you look at our operating budget for maintenance, you know, it has increased over time, but it's been increasing essentially in line with inflation, and not unusual, you know, as we go through our budget cycles every year, if we have monies that we can allocate to maintenance that we need to, we do that. But maintenance is also the first line item that we look to reduce when the budgets are tight. And so it's unfortunate, and it is the reality. And this isn't, by the way, criticism of anybody, you know, so I never want to portray that, you know, this is a complaint. This is the situation that we're in. I present every year, you know, we work the presentations, we agree on a budget, and we manage the best we can with what we have. And so beyond the operating budget, we have the capital appropriations, right, which is what we're discussing tonight. So it's the combination of operating and the capital budget that enables us to keep our buildings in good repair. If we look at the history of the 5-year capital plan, right, so this is the approval of the overall plan. You know, the average requested is 24 million, the average approved is 19.7 million. So the approval rate on the 5-year plan has been about 81% over the last decade. What's been a little bit difficult is the approval rate of the 1-year funding. This is where the money actually is allocated. That's been about 66%. So this is the number that we have averaged, about 1.9 million per year. I will point out a couple of things here. As we've gone through some of the plan recommendations, right, the facility master plan, and then working on the school modernization plan, you'll see that we had some really kind of shy years here, and it's because we knew that we had plan coming. We weren't sure what buildings would be affected. So these are extraordinarily low. And then in some cases, you see in the following year, we did have some makeup. But I think it's fair to say that over time, as our buildings have aged and as we funded at a lower level than we probably should have, those unfunded facility liabilities have grown. And so we've got work to do beyond, the new school buildings. And so that's really the point that I wanted to make here, that, assuming approval of the CPS Next Generation Plan, we still have buildings that we're gonna have to dedicate resources to. And you'll see at the end, we have some recommendations on maybe how to go about it a little bit differently. But the overall 5-year request that's been presented is 32.5 million. And you can see very quickly, window replacements are about 28% of that. Paving, roofing, sidewalk, and masonry repairs, about 6.8 million. CAF improvements, about 5 million. HVAC, 3 million. The fire alarm control systems, which, are very dated, and we are asking for funding for Dodd in the next budget year. That's another 2.2 million. And then you can see the rest of the categories, are relatively high. Again, these are things that we need to do to keep the buildings in good repair and safe. But it does exclude Chapman, Norton, Darcy, and Humiston. Humiston was excluded because when we prepared the capital budget, we weren't exactly sure what was going to happen with the school modernization plan. So, we will have to come back to that next year. This is the same 32.5 million, except showing it by school. Not surprisingly, Cheshire High School and Dodd Middle School, being the oldest and largest buildings, have the higher appropriation. Doolittle's relatively high because we know we have to replace the roof at Doolittle, and that's $3 million that's included in the capital budget. And Highlands at about 3.8 million. The purpose of showing you this is very important. The request that we made to the Board of Education for funding for 22-23 is $5.6 million. Okay, so we had window replacements, $1.3 million. Roofing mostly was that, but also some paving and sidewalk repair, $975. Improvements to the cafeterias was $845. Fire alarm control system, $650. $645 for HVAC, $590 for lighting and electrical improvements, floor, ceiling, tile, door replacement, another $300,000. So that was the request submitted to the Board of Ed. The Board of Education, starting with the Planning Committee and then ultimately approved by the Board of Ed. The discussions centered around, what are the things that we can push for one more year, understanding that school modernization was going to be an agenda item, for the council, and then, if the council approved it for the voters at referendum. So what the Board of Education approved was not the 5.6 million, but 2.6 million. So, as we present tonight, I just want the council members to know that this was reduced from the original request that was made. So this is just the sum total of the 2.6 million. We are still requesting the $650,000 to replace the fire alarm control system at Dodd, which I believe is the only item that would have to go to referendum because it's one item, one school. This is divided, the $645 for HVAC, the lighting and electrical, floor tile, door replacement, window replacements, and tackle that. And then the site paving, roofing is $375,000. So because these are at different schools and for different projects, they wouldn't meet the referendum requirement of $500,000. So that 2.6 million is shown here in chart form. I'm assuming we're going to sit down and kind of work through it, so I won't spend much time on this right now. Other than to point out that there's 50,000. So the planning money request is 50,000 for window replacement at Doolittle, 50,000 for roof replacement at Doolittle, and then there was another 50,000 for design work, for parking and general repaving at Highland, and another 50,000 to improve the exit out of Highland. So that was planning money that was requested, and Sean has a slightly different recommendation on how to do that. So I believe that was the reductions that Mr. Kimball made to the budget request. So a couple of things that I wanted to mention this evening. One is that we are, the council members know that we worked with Amoresco about 8 years ago now to do an energy performance contract where we did a number of upgrades to school and town buildings. It was about a $10 million total project. And the savings from the energy reduction over 15 years basically paid for those infrastructure improvements. And so Amoresco was the company that led that initiative. Mr. Clavette and I have met with Amoresco. We talk to them once a year because they do a review of the results of that energy performance contract. So we did receive from them an initial proposal, not from the same group in Amoresco, but rather their asset sustainability, to help us look at our buildings, the remaining buildings that, so this assumes that school modernization is approved, to look at the remaining buildings, help us assess what our capital needs by doing a detailed review, and then helping us build a detailed plan, and then helping us to manage that plan. So I'm not making any recommendation tonight, and this is breaking news. I haven't shared it with the Board of Ed Planning Committee where this would go, but the idea here is to take a really structured long-term view of what our building needs and have it prioritized by an independent third party that has expertise in this. I will tell you that we put a lot of time and effort into building the capital budget and making recommendations, but I can't stand in front of you and say, we know we've got everything accounted for on that list. And so I think this would be a good investment. The rough order of magnitude proposal was about 60,000 if we do the full scope, for all the buildings. So that's just one thought that I wanted to leave you with. And the second is, we just received a proposal which we had requested from Consulting Engineering Services, and they've done other work, for the town or the school side. And the request was, what would it take to upgrade Dodd Middle School to be fully ventilated and air conditioned? Now the number came in at 6.5 million. 1.5 million of that is just the electricity upgrade that would be required at Dodd in order to retrofit that school. And so we can use this as a gauge for what it would cost to other buildings. I know that, one of the questions that came up, I know Mr. Slocum asked, was, what would it cost to air condition Doolittle? Because Highland's already air conditioned. Presumably the new elementary schools will be. So that would leave Dodd Elementary as on the air conditioned. So it would be, because Dodd is smaller, it would be smaller than that number. But, it is a significant investment if we were to go forward with that. So again, no action being taken on that. It's not proposed in the capital budget. This is a proposal that, we just received. This cost us, this is really a preliminary stage. We didn't
And how
pay for
deep a
that.
dive do they go
With Amoresco?
Yeah.
They'll go deep. They'll come to every building. They'll start by, interviewing the building administrator, Rich and myself. Then they would examine the building.
I thought they were like an energy focused sort of outfit. They're deeper than that.
This particular group that's what they specialize in. And we could go more surface level or very deep where we have them actually inspect every piece of equipment, which is probably what we should do if we are going to go forward with something like this. But this needs a lot more discussion,
Right.
again, at the planning and the board level before it comes here. So those are the two things that I wanted to let you know about. Again, this is something that we did pay several $1,000s to get that evaluation, but now we have it in hand. We'll go through it in some more detail and figure out, if nothing else, at least how to stage what we plan on doing, because some of the 5-year request does include ventilation system improvements at Dodd. Just a quick reminder that we do have a building maintenance CNR fund. If there's ever an emergency, there's $233,000 still available, and that is a fund that we would, have to get board approval and then council approval. Fortunately, you can see we haven't needed to use it since June of 2019, but that is there as a backdrop for us. And then just a couple of pictures here that, we all know that, when we make these improvements to our school, they are long-term investments. So, this is the improvements that we made with the senior courtyard window replacements. These are the new boilers at Doolittle. They were just installed this summer. Much more efficient, do a better job of, providing heat to the building. And you can see that we have 3 boilers, so they are redundant in case of a failure. And this you really can't, that's Rich Clavette, if you don't know him.
Yep.
But,
He's boiler number 3.
those, yeah, right. Those are the 2, new boiler systems that were installed at Highland. Now, Highland's on natural gas, so those are, condensing, very high efficiency boilers. Unfortunately, Doolittle, we don't have natural gas as an option. It still uses heating oil. But those improvements were made, over this past summer. So, there's no doubt we've been making investments, and we just need to continue to do that.
What's the lifespan of those?
If I'm going to guess 25 years, but that's probably what they would tell us.
What the lifespan is.
Now, that's where we were before this picture was taken. We took a tour.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
I
remember?
I just, I was struggling in my mind if it was the high school or Doolittle, because we went to both of those schools.
You did, and Paul Bowman was there and said that he had worked on those boilers when he was a kid
Oh,
for his
okay.
dad.
Okay.
And they were much taller.
Yep.
And louder, so
He was
Yeah.
shorter.
again, if anybody wants to get a tour, if anybody wants to get a tour of, the boiler plant, it's really nice. And, Rich, this was before the floor was painted and everything. Rich is very detail oriented, so that boiler room is pristine, as is Highland now.
Great.
So that's it. Just a little perspective around the capital budget request.
All right, page 93 in your notes, just if you haven't found it yet. But just a couple of questions. Then you talk about, and not in any particular order other than the notes that I wrote down. You talked about Doolittle replacing the roof, and I see it's about a 20% reimbursement. You talk about Dodd, HVAC. Would we get more reimbursement if those items were part of phase 2 of the modernization plan, which has been talked about and is, potentially a few years down the road?
Well, if we did a renovators new now, as an example.
Well, and that's what
or
those
even not
schools are
even,
planned
even if
for.
we did a partial renovation,
Yeah.
the reimbursement rate would be 50%. It's a big
50%?
amount. It would be, well, it's 50% now.
Yeah.
Well, but that's only for
Oh, it's in that 25
That's for
years.
25 years.
for every school. I thought it was just for this project.
It could,
Potential
it could
project.
change with the new
Well, what was the
legislation.
old rate?
It was 40. It would have been 46%.
Well, so it's not that different. Okay, all right. So there is
The rehab is
significant.
new, right?
Yeah, so rehab is new, which is what was talked about
Renovation.
in school modernization. So, I mean, wouldn't it make sense for us to get through this November,
yes.
see that this passes, get the community used to the fact that we can build these schools in an efficient, proper manner, get them up and going, and then move on to phase 2 for parity and equity and all the other reasons that are gonna get thrown at us, that then these items really, we try to make them wait?
This is the dilemma that we've had and we're going to
Right.
continue to have. At what point do you say this has to be done versus we
Right.
can wait to do it? And
And
that is the
everything's a 3-year.
assessment.
It's a 3-year
Yeah.
wait just to get started.
Right.
Can
So
I build
that-
on that
Yeah,
question
sure.
and interrupt, because those were my notes, and my notes were, if we're putting all this money into new roofs and new other improvements that we're doing on buildings that we know in the 5 or 6 year, 8-year plan we're gonna have to replace, are any of these things able to be saved, or is this just an expenditure for those 5 years until we demolish everything and take it away?
Well, it depends on
Yeah,
which.
do you
which
follow
item
where
we're-
I'm going? Are you
Yeah,
gonna put
we're
a new
asking
roof on
about.
Doolittle, for
Yeah,
instance?
that
Now, are we renovating that building and tearing it apart, or are we leaving it where it is and just doing the inside, and can the roof stay?
Well, your plan with the modernization was to just
Renovate it.
renovate as new, so
But
it's staying.
that's what I'm saying, so
Yeah.
if we evaluate these projects based on what is liable to remain in the building in, as part of a remodeling
Mhm.
situation, then that, there's a
Okay,
different piece there. Then you could do it sooner, so that they didn't have to
But with
wait
less
5 years.
reimbursement.
With
That's
less
my point.
reimbursement, right,
The reimbursement.
no, I understand, but I get
That's
that,
the dilemma,
yeah, but that's the dilemma, but I would want not to be putting a new roof on a building that hope that in 5 years we were gonna make totally go away.
Yeah, well.
You know, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it was leaking or
Roofs are a
unsafe.
great example, actually. I did give out the roof schedule, and I'm not gonna take you to all the details. If you just look at the last page.
This handout,
Yeah,
right,
this handout,
okay,
I'm sorry.
okay, that's okay.
So what the detail shows is that, we have, the last page shows that we have a total of about 604,000 square feet of roofing across all the school buildings, of which 49% is under warranty, which is important. That means the roof has been, replaced within the
Reasonable.
last 20 years and some very recent. But we have about 51% out of warranty. Because it's out of warranty, doesn't mean the roof's leaking. So what this report does show is what percentage of the roofs are in poor condition, fair condition, good condition, and excellent. So the roofs in poor and fair condition, obviously those we would work to address first. The roofs in good condition, we continue to keep them in good repair, and I think I've explained to the council that it's not unusual for us. Like, we kept a good portion of the Dodd roofs intact for a number of years just by replacing the seams because the rubber roof membrane fields are good. Doolittle, because that is, one of the ones that's on our kind of near term. The Doolittle, the large roof system, I'm sorry, I'm on page 2 now.
Yeah.
So Doolittle, that, it's in red, that 75,000 square feet, that's the main roof section at Doolittle, and it's in fair condition. Not poor, not fair, it's not leaking substantively, but it will have to get replaced. And you could see that it was installed in 1993. So we're getting really close to 30 years. And you can see the comment on the far right, there is an option to recoat, which would give us a 10-year warranty, or a full replacement, which would, we would get, probably a 20-year warranty on a full replacement. And that product, the Hypalon product, and I'm not a roofing expert, but they don't manufacture that product. It's not used for roofing systems anymore, apparently. Not very easy to repair. So that's the dilemma we have,
Right.
Are we gonna renovate Doolittle when? When do we
Do we just,
make the decision that, yep, we need to replace the roof? If we renovate as new, what's the likelihood we're gonna change the footprint and require the roof system to be replaced?
Yeah,
I don't
okay.
know.
and that would be
Right.
with any one of these schools, so
So
certainly.
remind me, if you will, the order of operations was obviously these first 2 school buildings.
Mhm.
What was I know the high school's last, but what were the phase outs?
Well, I think originally it was gonna be the next 2 elementary schools were
Okay.
going to be done, but
Okay.
then I think there was some question that we needed to weigh the cost and the need for Dodd over those other 2. If those
Right.
other 2 were operating well, maybe we did Dodd first. All 3 of those were in that next
Okay.
phase, basically, so.
So almost the larger question might be the cooling system for Dodd, in the
Right.
whole scheme of
Right.
things.
Exactly.
That becomes, your second platform,
Mhm.
because it may.
It may.
I recognize that some of the decisions that have to be made have to be with the eye towards, what project is next. But I don't have any simple answers
No.
on some of those questions.
But looking at the one with Humiston where it's a slate roof and or
I mean, you guys will be sitting at your desk with umbrellas soon.
I mean, the good thing about Slate is it really doesn't wear out,
No,
but
but it's in poor condition.
it does fail.
Right.
So, and it is in a historic district, so, if we have to do a like-for-like replacement, it is,
We'll provide you with umbrellas with your names and raincoats, so
Yeah,
you'll
a lot
be fine,
cheaper.
right?
Those are diving daggers.
Yeah.
They just kill.
Yeah, they were
Yeah,
blowing
I-
off
Sure,
the
well, they
roof
were-
at one
yeah,
point,
yeah,
which
right.
was a little hairy.
Yeah, that's
Pay
scary.
attention walking in.
Um, Just a couple other things, and then we'll open up to everybody with their own individual questions and whatnot in there. But you also mentioned planning. And I know that you have 4 projects in there at $50,000 each, but I don't want to speak for Sean, so if you want to be ready. You consolidated that to one $100,000 appropriation to their planning account?
Yeah, to create a planning account, just like we have on the town side, we've been typically appropriating $100,000, I would say every other year, depending on the need. Obviously, we've tapped into a fair amount of that through the planning and Colliers, as Chuck Warrington is here today, as we've embarked on that process. So I have proposed on the town side a replacement to that account, as we typically would do at $100,000. But in reviewing the Board of Ed's requests, and not just in year 1, there's really a couple in year 2 and 3. There were probably 5 or 6, maybe half a dozen $50,000 requests to design window replacements at the high school, the roof replacement, and those. And it just seemed like maybe this is an opportunity to just aggregate those into one, refill it as needed, but then do what we do on the town side with the general planning account, but with project specific. So that's I put a new account there at 100,000, and you'll see I zeroed out maybe 4 or so first year $50,000 items. So the net is probably down about 100,000.
Sure. I noticed that Chuck Warrington's in the room, and I know he perhaps came to help us with any questions we might have had on the motion passed before you arrived. Okay.
Yeah.
We did.
I'm here.
Yeah.
We've done that already.
Right, we
so-
did
Very
it.
Might as well
timely.
make myself useful.
Well, I just figured for the record, I reintroduce you, but also, just search if that was why you were here.
He heard renovate is new. And he just-
I
he
wasn't
comes
sure.
right in.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we did have from my colleague John Manuel a question about the budget and how we arrived at the number, and were we positive of the number, and I said we were, but now you could reiterate that we
Yeah,
are.
the total number?
Yeah.
16666.
Yeah, I
Tim
mean,
said you guaranteed it.
GMP, John.
The motion guarantees it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, we're as confident as we can be. I think we all discussed the uncertainties, and we've included the 8% inflation, which is a huge number. Anything higher than that, I question if it'd be responsible. But we got to keep an eye on that. So it's all about budget management. If it goes forward, that's the key to any of these projects, regardless of the current financial conditions. So no, I think we have good numbers in there. And we'll have to, hopefully it passes and move forward.
Well, thanks for showing up.
My pleasure.
We're in the mundane other items within the Board of Ed's capital budget at this
No
point.
worries, I'd rather be here than not.
Okay. All right. Well,
As
that's
long
great.
as
Thank
you are here,
Yeah.
Chuck,
Yeah.
there is an awful lot of people, anxious to know what we're putting together. It's schematics and art, so that'll be something for the admin committee to hear about the next time we meet.
Absolutely.
I hope,
Yeah.
because I think that's the next phase. And
Yeah, we started that
All that kind of
process
stuff.
already and have a
Yeah.
nice collection of sample photos that I think will sell the project well, but not give just one visual that folks are buying.
I was on a call with an architect today. They mentioned, oh yeah, we're supplying
Yeah.
photographs
Oh,
to
good.
Chuck. So that's good.
this is good. So thanks for.
Hopefully it works well. It's the first time we're trying it, so it'll be interesting to see how it works out.
Right.
This model.
Let's see. Thank you for that. I'll give you back the meeting, Mr. Barrow.
No, that's fine.
Sorry.
Thank you. All right. So planning, and then my last item that I want to ask is the fire alarm. Are there any, because it's $150,000 over the referendum amount, and I really wanted an effort to clear the decks so that the town is focused on one item. I understand this is important, so I mean, it may have, what has to be, has to be, but are there any grants that are available for this that could net this down a little bit? Is there leftover prior appropriations of some kind that we could use that don't fall into
You
this?
still have to referendum it. though.
Well, if there's grants, no, but if there's prior appropriations, yes.
650.
Unless we can use some of it for planning separately and make it separate to plan, but that's,
So
you're right.
with respect to whether or not there's grants, I'd have to look, and Sean did give me a heads up on that question. But I don't know. The 650, when we provided that estimate, unfortunately was before, some of the material shortage. I'm not sure that the 650 is still a good number, but let's go with the 650. If I could find a grant opportunity, I'll certainly present it, but I can't, as I sit here, give you an answer to that. The need, the risk we run, and Dodd is the oldest, it's not in bad shape, but you can't get replacement parts for the fire alarm system. And it is a project that is going to take some time to install the fire alarm system because we have to retrofit in an existing building. It's multiple floors, and it's not just the pull station. There's all the sirens that have to be installed as part of this. It is an upgrade that needs to be done. And we, with the Board of Ed, we spoke for a long time about whether or not we needed to put that on the request for this year. So,
I mean, is it possible that we can give you design money? How long is it going to take to design it? Maybe not a year, but if it's going to take you 6 months, 8 months to design it anyway, can we get that started for this year and say, okay, fine, design it now, and then next year, once you've got it fairly well designed, then we can go out and make it a referendum item.
we can do that, and just we all understand it's a failure risk. It's not failing now, so we're a little nervous about it, but again, it's working.
I have to tell you, I'd be nervous about it. When somebody tells me the fire alarms parts are hard to replace, I don't think this town ever rejects safety at a referendum.
No, and I'm not saying that.
And I just don't think maybe we should, skinny that one down. And I'm not looking to have multiple referendum questions, but here's the question that maybe relates to if Dodd becomes the second tier of a renovate or something, what happens with that equipment? Is it usable because we just, did the building, or is it gotta
Well, I think if we renovate as new, we would work to keep the core fire. I mean, the panel is part of the investment. The installation is the
Right.
second part of the investment.
Okay.
I don't envision that we're going to be knocking down all the classroom walls as
No.
part of a renovate as new. So I would say that there might be some modifications.
Right,
but the core
right,
system
but it's
is
not
gonna
like
be
it doesn't
there.
get eliminated or replaced
And I don't-
totally because of a code change.
Well, Chuck is here, thankfully. I mean, if we were to renovate Dodd as new, because I know you're familiar with the building, and we installed this upgraded fire alarm system. As renovate as new, can we keep most of that or all of it intact?
I think so. I think you'd want to, provide a statement to the state saying, hey, we just, if it's safe, it's in 3 or 4 years and it's substantially complete, you want to talk to them, but if it's relatively new, same thing like with the roof, you're talking about the roofs. We've done projects where the roofs were recently redone, and we put in stipulations in the contract that say you have to maintain a warranty, you have to hire a certified contractor, Firestone, Carla, whoever the system is, and we preserve those so that you don't have to do the payback, for the roofs. But I think, if you have a strong argument that, hey, it's brand new, up to date, I think they'll work with it. They don't want to spend good money. They don't want to spend good money after good money.
Makes sense.
Are you suggesting you get a reimbursement then after the fact, or you just don't have to do that work with the renovation?
I don't think you get reimbursed for it, but you might, if it's a code upgrade, I think it's worth trying to explore. I mean, they are starting to expand what's available. I don't know if we could list it under a code violation type. If you got the fire marshal say, hey, it's outdated, you might be able to qualify under a CV project.
You're just saying you don't have to do that work again if you did it a few years ago and
Yeah, you have to talk to them. I think you have a good chance, but I'd definitely talk to the state and see what they think. Because usually when they say renovate, everything's like new. There's a project where I think that they just did the kitchen, and there's questions of do we have to replace the kitchen? Well, again, that we've told the architect, you gotta go talk to the owner and the state and ensure that, because in 20 years, they say, oh, we want to upgrade the fire alarm system. Well, 20 years ago, you had that opportunity, you needed to take it. So,
But what Chuck is also saying is, if this falls under code compliance, there is a reimbursement for that under the school construction
upgrades, yeah.
grant program. So we could get reimbursed.
Now or
Awesome.
down
Well,
in the
that's-
future?
No, I think Chuck is saying now.
Yeah,
it's a
that's,
non-priority list project. It could be a non-priority, possibly a non-priority list project.
But that's one of the places that I will check. I mean, would this qualify?
It
It's
doesn't hurt
really,
to ask.
yeah.
it's not really,
50%.
we didn't look at it as a code compliance upgrade. And like ADA.
Right.
Is a classic example.
Yeah.
That would fall under code compliance.
And then we get reimbursement for that.
Get your fire marshal to quote something to you, it might substantiate.
David? Oh,
Uh,
you said-
just what's that,
Oh,
Mr. Kimball?
Fully just on that
And then
one
Mr.
item,
Matt.
it also might be worth exploring whether ARP funds
I-
qualify. And
That's
we did
just what I
receive-
said to Mr. Walsh.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Enough
again,
to make it, because
Right,
that's
as
a
we
grant
talked about
money.
with Bartlett South, we have some funding that's coming to replace some of the money we thought we were going to use.
Mhm.
And we talked about freeing up that 250,000.
So I think collectively, we can get some more information next couple of weeks that can see if there's a way to limit the number of referendum questions, to show the community we are trying to focus on this one thing that needs to be done in all shape, ways, and forms. Mr. Milo.
No, Jim had his hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
Yeah, just about the fire alarms.
Yeah, sure.
It says here, so upgrading these systems provide important additional features such as addressable supervisor points, which decrease alarm, so blah, 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 blah. So does that mean the current system, we don't know where the alarm is coming from when the current system goes off? Is that what that's saying?
You do know where the alarm is, but not to the precision of a newer system.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
general sense.
Yeah, it would,
General zone.
Yeah.
you got a zone, but the newer systems, we know it's classroom
You know exactly where it is. Okay. But obviously it improves the reaction time or the
Yeah.
response time.
Yeah, certainly the first responders want to know that information.
Right, okay. Gotcha.
Thank you, John.
And this may be, others may understand this, but, and you started to say a few things. So we have a fire alarm control 5-year budget of $2.25 million. And then we've selected 650 for Dodd. And that's gonna be a referendum item, or this, explain it to me, because I'm a little in the back.
If
in
the
dark.
net cost of the town is more than $500,000,
So
it
that's
becomes, that's why I was talking about, quietly, can we talk about ARP funds, which you did? Can we talk about grant money, which I thought there was something, but didn't know enough to know what it was. But I also wondered if there was a way that we could design it now and spend the money on that, if there was no grant money available. But we've got a lot of options here to look at.
But why, if we have this as a 5-year item, what makes Dodd, I'm just curious, more important right now than the remainder of that $2.25 million that you budgeted?
Yeah, the remainder, we requested, just so everyone understands, we requested $950,000 to do the high school, but that's not for the third year of the capital budget. And same thing for Dula. Dodd is the oldest system.
So it's the oldest, so that's why you put it first on the, I was just curious why Dodd was up there for the first year. Okay.
So it's by age as opposed to any.
And could you get it done this year? I mean, would you be able to design it, get it bid, and get it done if we approve the money, or is that not really?
Probably not, and it would still put us, to the following summer to get the work done. Although there is a possibility some of the work can be done off hours. But yeah, we wouldn't get it done this summer. Plus with the supply chain, I'm not sure what the parts availability, we haven't checked recently.
But there is a design and procurement effort that has to go into this. It's not like you've fully defined it and it's ready to go.
Just page 129 is where it is, if we want to see the detail. All set?
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, sure. Just a quick question on, if you don't approve this, which I don't see us, I agree with our sheriff, Slocum, that we can't go, we can't pass on safety. But if this fails, it will cost a lot more than $650. if it
Well,
failed, or
we had a-
cause safety issues, I know that, but.
So the first complication would be if you don't have a working fire alarm system, which, you know, of course, we were trying to patch thing together to keep it running. But if you don't have a working fire alarm system, the typical protocol is you have to have a fire watch in the building. So you literally have to have somebody that, or several people in the case of Dodd, stand around and make sure that there's no fire that occurs. You know, so there's that logistical issue. And then if we had to try and replace it on an emergency basis, I mean, it always costs you more on an emergency basis. But this is a long installation process.
So
to get
these
this
three
done.
schools of Dodd, that's based on age of each of their fire systems, so that's why you have it in that order. Do you foresee Doolittle or Cheshire High Schools coming up in the next year or so, or is that several years out?
Well, we pushed it out to year 3. in
Year
the
3,
capital
okay,
plan.
okay.
Yeah, I think you don't compromise safety. I think you go and look for all these other opportunities to reduce them.
Yeah.
And I don't believe anybody who's a voter would compromise their children's
Right.
safety, given the environment today. So I think we need to get it done.
But as Mr. Kimball said, I mean,
Right.
if we could find some grant money, whether it's school
Right.
construction grant, or if there were art money that could be allocated and it doesn't require the referendum, I mean, those are certainly things that would be helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Absolutely.
thought all we had to do with that was turn it into revenue.
We do.
Mhm.
It's a simple thing, but
But that's
we're
just-
being very careful of that money. We have a major project
Oh, I
that
understand, I
might,
understand
you
that.
know, need some of
You know.
it if it passes in the way it's supposed to otherwise. So, but you're right, that is something that, all right, I'm gonna open it up to others who have questions, budget committee members, first if you've got other questions, and then we'll go to,
I just have one other one, and again, I haven't been here on it, so I don't know what's been done. But obviously, given what's going on for safety improvements, I assume those have all been taken care of, and we don't need to budget anything for additional safety improvements, security improvements in schools.
We have, I guess,
you haven't finished, so.
yeah, I mean, we still have some funds that are allocated for school safety and security. The big projects that we did over the past summer were to install person traps at the high school, at Doolittle, at Highland, and Norton. No, it's not Norton. What was the fourth one?
Wasn't Chapman?
No, it wasn't Chapman. We didn't do Chapman,
No,
Norton.
Chapman.
or
Yeah,
Darcy.
right, no,
We
no,
avoided them for that
Yeah,
reason.
right.
High school, Dodd, Doolittle, and Highland.
Highland.
So those 4 were installed over the summer. We have grant funding that we will be getting reimbursed about 40% of that project, which was around 800,000 or so. So I will be making a request to the council when that money is received to appropriate it back so that we can continue to make improvements. We've, gone through all our buildings. We've replaced, quite a bit of the exterior doors to upgrade that. We've upgraded all our video systems. We just did a survey to add additional video systems to the outside of the building. These are providing surveillance services, that are important, but our police department is tied in and gets a live feed, of all our video footage. We've, made improvements to, the actual, alarm systems in the building, the lockdown system. We've invested quite a bit of training. We do follow the ALICE protocol for, violent intruder. So, we've not been shy of quiet.
Just to point out, radio system.
The radio system upgrade, so we can communicate directly with first responders now from any school radio. So we've come a long way. There are still, some things that, are on our list for completion, but, the perimeters, have been established, and we do need to replace some of the door fronts, in some of the buildings. And the only reason we didn't do Norton or Chapman or Darcy has more to do with the physical structure of the building. It was before the school modernization decision was made. So, we still have some dollars that are allocated for that, but, we don't think we should go forward.
So there's no need for additional, that's why there's nothing on here, you have the money, okay, thank you.
We have what we need. And again, we have quite a bit of school security grant money. That's in the coffers that can be, it is reimbursement grant, but it's sitting waiting for us, so we're in good shape, I think.
I would just add that, there's really two components to school security. There's the facility perspective, the hardening of facilities, which has been just articulated. We've invested millions of dollars in over the last 2 years. First, not 2 years, several years. But the other component to that is behavioral and threat detection and response. And we've also, over the last 6 years, engaged in a lot of mental health work. We've added mental health supports. We've trained in ALICE, which is the equivalent of like run, hide, fight sort of response. Crazy to think about it, but unfortunately that's become more of a reality. So there really is a two-pronged approach. We really emphasize diffusing violence before it occurs within our own community. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen from outside the community. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen from within, but the things that we're doing are a direct effort to better people's lives and reduce the likelihood of threat. So we're really keyed into both of those components. So I appreciate the security question, John.
No, I appreciate this discussion, just as someone who hadn't seen it all done before. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you for asking. Jim, Mr. James?
I don't have anything else.
All right. Other council members have questions on any of the items? Page 97 through 103 lists all the items. Again, concentrating on year one. Well, not 97, this skips to 101. And 102 or 103. I mean, basically, a year ago at this time, we cleared the decks of items that were redundant for the school modernization, and we also pushed off items that weren't a high priority as a way to find some savings in our capital budget to cover some of the cost of the school modernization, which even with the cost overruns because of COVID, has netted down thanks to our legislatures, to about the same cost as we were looking at before. Sure, Mr. Walsh.
I do like the idea. I think it's going to be next year is with the widening of Highland driveway. I think anybody who's gotten onto Route 10 in the morning or in the afternoon, I think it'll help the traffic down there because on Route 10, even though it's widening the driveway because cars go out. So I think that's an
There's
important.
two requests for Highland. One is to expand the amount of parking because it's tight, enrollment's growing. I mean, we're going to increase staff a bit, and then the entry and exit out of Highland, is tough. It's not going to get any better if we have higher enrollment. I appreciate you acknowledging that one.
Where can you get, where do you have room for parking there?
We'd have to clear out. Well,
Is it up toward the front by the
we
police? or is it-
circle
Oh,
right
okay.
that
Okay,
little
down in
circle
there.
there, and then over towards the police.
Okay.
Where the solar installation.
Yeah, instead of the
Okay.
circle, you might be able to make 2 rows of cars
Okay.
or something.
Yeah, because I know it's desperate there.
Yeah.
One other thing I didn't see on here, and maybe I don't see it, but even with 5 years out, I think the turf at the high school needs to be addressed sooner than later because it's 12 years old. It's still going well. Yeah, I know.
So, yes. It's great that you bring that up because I don't remember if I was talking to Jeff or somebody, but we'll add it to the capital budget for next year. The turf field is out of warranty. We have a maintenance agreement though. We take good care of it. We only had to do one repair, since it's been installed. It's holding up great. Every year it gets GMAX tested, and it's very safe. It meets the GMAX test requirements. It's used extensively, which we're real happy about. So it's not an immediate need, but you're right. We do need to queue it up.
And there was an
for
account
replacement.
that was supposed to, so much from each ticket was going into it and all that.
Yeah, and that account, without this year's contribution, has about 41,000 in it, and we've been collecting between 3,000 and 4,000 per year. There's $1 surcharge per ticket sold when there's an event where we're selling tickets.
That includes state playoff matches like we'll host in the next couple of weeks. It was you and I talking about it. We had talked about the idea that Bartland Park the addition of a turf field
Might be
there.
the time to do it.
I don't know if anybody does a buy one, get one turf sale, but if,
Have any
maybe
left over?
I like that
with
idea.
a volume discount, like, if you're on
Group buy,
site,
yeah.
maybe to do two. I don't know if there's any.
That
No.
field,
Should ask the academy, they're putting in a new one, and
Yeah.
replacing the old one, I think, right now.
Right.
We take the blue field.
Are they replacing their one?
They're resurfacing the existing one and putting a
Okay.
new one in the back.
Which was built at the same
Seems
time.
like ours was
Ours
just
is
done.
held up.
that field is
Yeah.
so well
Better,
designed.
yeah, better
It
than
still
theirs.
drains
Yeah,
great.
it was at the same time.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, John's smiling because it was Vince McDermott and Winona McBroom that, did the design work, the bid work, the selection, of the turf
You done
manufacturer.
right.
Couldn't be any
Not always,
happier
not always.
with that one. It's
Well,
a great investment, I
once it's
think.
a-
I was
Actually, it wasn't much
expecting-
of an investment.
I was expecting it to be replaced in 10 years, so every year we get after that is.
Yeah.
That's right. All set, Mr. Wall?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Slocum?
Just a quick question on the renovation number, the 2,385,000. The one that we're thinking is quite important, but is obviously gonna be subject to a little bit more, review, is the, fire alarm system, correct? Everything else we're comfortable with, basically? I mean, it
That's
seems
what I was
to
just gonna
me,
run around
right,
and see,
we
the
are.
table
I-
and see. It seems like everybody's comfortable with what's been presented, that the Board of Ed has done a good job and the town manager putting it all together.
So
Planning.
where does it leave us, as they leave? When do you get back to us, Vin, with a better understanding of fire alarm?
You gotta give me
20 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's
Couple
why,
hours.
2
Well,
weeks,
here's the thing,
2 weeks is,
but-
when
but-
when you
when
review, the 6th and the
this
7th, one of those
becomes-
2 days, we're gonna meet again to review answers to some questions.
But
come up
we
tonight.
adopt this budget in August when we adopt.
Well, we can wait till August, or we can do it sooner to have the 5-year plan done. It's up
But
to
we
you.
can't even set up the referendum item for the
Those
school
items have to
until
wait
then
until
anyway.
August, right?
So I mean, if there's in fact a referendum, she's got really plenty of time to figure this out.
Well, I mean, it'll take me a couple of weeks to see, to get the answer.
Right,
Is it
so we
school
would know
construction
within our
going out?
window.
Within the
Or is it-
window,
Oh, yeah.
right.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying.
yeah.
It won't take me that long. I'll get back to you. And this is just our first meeting. It's not even the negotiating meeting.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
no. We don't do
Doesn't
that
sound like
anymore.
we
We're just
just-
sloppy spending.
Doesn't even have to break arms
Yeah.
Yeah, what's 167 million?
All right, any further questions or comments from council members? Keep it quiet.
I have one thing for Jeff. So,
Yes, sir.
thank you. I just want to interrupt your distraction there.
That's all right.
I apologize. I know.
No,
it's-
you're good. Yeah, I wish.
You know, I occasionally hear, but don't look at Facebook, but there was a question, do our kids have drills? It's all that good stuff. And apparently, I know they do. But is there, does this terrible moment that's presented itself once again reared its ugly head? Is there a public outreach kind of situation informing the public? Not that it can't happen here, of course, because anything can happen here. But is that in the offing? I'm sure you've been reassuring school parents and things of that nature. But half of us are, well, more than half of us are not involved
Don't
in
have school
schools at
parents.
all.
It's
We
still
don't
a concern,
hear,
yeah.
we don't hear reports of this, that, and the other thing. And their safety is obviously important to everybody. So I just didn't really know, to dovetail with John's concern and where we
Yeah.
are, if there is something that needs to just be somehow shared.
So I did just share with Sean the email that I sent, in short order yesterday, probably about 7:30, to our families and asked them to share that with you. I think, what we certainly could do is point to the information on our website that kind of articulates the school security measures that we've taken. Vin and I are in the process of planning a mailer to all homes in Cheshire.
Oh,
Because
good.
we felt like the school modernization, this was in the works prior. Certainly it's easy enough to include that component so that everybody in the community does have that, information. At the very least, we can do that.
Yeah, I think that's excellent with something planned for every household.
Yeah, we had kind of held off on it until we had the last financials.
Sure.
And Sean shared those with me yesterday. And so, I think we're in that process. On the school modernization front, though, I mean, we're working closely with the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Preparing for the parade this weekend and stuff.
No, I know everyone's busy and I know it's important and we all think it's very important.
Yeah, of course,
You
but
know, the
security is
best-
critical. That's
Yeah,
what we
and
do
I-
want
and
to
I just
educate the
think,
broader
you know,
community.
What we've done and what we can do, and we know
Good
it, some
suggestion.
people know it, but I
Yeah.
think if we could get it out there.
Great suggestion. We'll include that in our townwide mailer.
Okay.
You mentioned drills, so we do drills every school, every month, every third month has to substitute a fire drill for some other
Right.
type of drill, whether it's a shelter in place, or a lockdown, which takes on a different approach in the Alice protocol. And our first responders are there for the drills. They do review the drills.
Right.
And they let us know if there is something that needs to be done. And some of the recommendations that came out of the drills in the past have been that the radios weren't necessarily working up to the standard that we needed. So, we've replaced all the radios. So those, the rating of the drills has become, an important component of that process. And that came after Sandy Hook, actually. That was one of the.
I know there'll be a article in the Republican American in the next couple of days because they just did an interview today on
Good.
Alice and training that occurs, and they asked to interview a secretary who just recently went through the in-person training we held in April. We instituted the program in 2019, and then as we trained everybody through 1920, COVID came along. That dramatically shifted what we were doing. Then we just initiated in-person. We've been doing video trainings. We just initiated the in-person again in April. All of our staff will be retrained again in August in person, and then we'll again come back through student training. ALICE is an acronym that stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. Not necessarily in that order. Certainly counter is the last thing we want our students and staff doing. But we, do train things like distracting a shooter. If you're locked into a spot, there's nothing you can do. How can you do that? And it does give our people who are trained some semblance of control in an outrageous situation that you could feel powerless in. At least you feel informed and have a strategy. The first thing we want people to do, though, is if it's possible to escape the situation and run away, do that. Don't hunker down in a room and wait. And so it really is empowering. It's disturbing that we're talking about it, though.
No,
And
but
I'd like to just add, we talked a little bit, I think it's such a sad commentary on our world today that we're talking about security measures for schools. And I think it's a fine line that you guys have to walk. That doesn't make our school system an armed camp, because that's detrimental to all the mental health of the kids if we're constantly presenting them the fact that there's going to be a threat. There might be a threat. You might have this problem. That can be counterintuitive to their mental health. So it's a fine line to walk to satisfy the parents concerned. And as a parent and a grandmother, I get it. And it was a teacher. So I understand how scary that can be. And I did casket pieces for all those kids at Sandy Hook. I don't want to ever have to do that again. But I also don't want them to be going to school with an armed guard at the door. So there's got to be ways to do that without, and I think you're doing a great job doing that. I mean, that's my
Thanks.
point.
So we try and
Right.
balance
There,
those.
there's got to be a balance.
Because you can create anxiety
Yeah.
if the only time a staff member or a child feels safe at school is if we have armed personnel there.
Right.
That's not really a
No.
healthy environment either, because they leave school, they go to other places, college campuses that don't have that.
Yeah, right.
And we don't want to, foster anxiety. We need to ensure safe environments, and that's not a Cheshire Public Schools responsibility as much as it is a American responsibility at this point.
well, thank you for that.
Sure.
it's all very disturbing, but I know the
Yeah.
town has really done a lot in the last,
Well, you guys have seen
eight to
funded
10. Well, I remember, Fort Auditorium being loaded with people asking that consultant on, making our buildings better and safer, and what we could do and how we could embark on a path. So the town's done a lot of this. But, all the training drills in the world, you could still have a terrible thing pop
Sure.
upon.
And
We
Michelle
all know that,
Picarillo
too.
was there too. I mean, speaking to the fact that we have addressed that mental health component of this, and you guys graciously, provided our funding for us to engage in teen mental health next year. All sophomores will be trained as part of destigmatizing mental health issues, ensuring students or hopefully motivating students to access supports that are out there when they're in a bad place. And we work very closely with Tom Vivia, who's who's a local person. His son actually is his youngest is still at Cheshire High. He's a retired supervisor with the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. Was on scene at Sandy Hook. We've got a lot of advanced support in the school system, and hope that we never need it.
Well, if anyone feels, it's appropriate, I want to, make sure that you're invited to our regular council meeting in June, so that there could be any kind of public presentation that you deem
Sure.
appropriate.
I'd love to.
Yeah, because I realize we might get 32 viewers, but at least it's a worthy attempt at getting as much as the folks can understand we're engaged in the
I'll bring
process.
Vin. He drives ratings.
Yes.
Viewership is he's just short of influencer. So no worries.
All right,
there. The word will get out.
Okay.
family.
Okay.
I deal with this all day.
All right, well then,
But-
looks like
By
we're,
foil.
thank you. Looks like we're ready then. Next week, we will have the town department, so when you get a chance this week, look at your budgets,
Okay.
review them when you get to, we have them all lined up, right?
Yep, that's the plan.
Yeah, good, okay.
Yep.
It may run a little later, but it's instead of 3 or 4 meetings, but, we have early, so I have a half hour next week. To do
And
it.
that date
Yeah.
you wanted us to be looking at, the 6th and the 7th?
The 6th and the 7th, and Noel sent an email while we were here.
Oh, okay.
You see,
Okay.
as a wrap up, to get answers like from Vin and others, so that we can kind of have an idea of a 5-year plan we want to approve before we're all away on vacation. It was
Okay.
very hard last year, get
Right.
everybody together.
No, I
And
know.
this way, we're not having late June and July meetings.
Right. Okay.
All right. All right, I'll hand it back to you to adjourn.
Okay, thank you, thank you all, thank you,
Thank you.
professionals.
everyone.
I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
So I think that's.